Darkness kills, destroys the will. Find a spark, make hearts thrill. Hear the tales of time so grim. Shine a light, don't let it dim. Heather Brown downtown, bound. True crime story she's found. In the shadows, secret stay. Need a light that finds the way.
Welcome back to Defeating the Darkness, True Crime Stories with Downtown Heather Brown. That's me. I'm your host. I'm a former homicide and sexual assault prosecutor, and I have had the glorious pleasure of being married to a former FBI agent by the name of Tom Brown, nicknamed T-Bone. The man, the myth, the legend is back with us today for the second episode of Defeating the Darkness. We filmed one a while ago, and we're following up with some very exciting stories. So welcome back.
Thank you.
You didn't have to drive far to come see me.
It was an easy commute. It's great to be back. Thank you. I didn't think I was going to get invited back after the first episode.
Well, you knew you'd be invited back. Come on now.
So I hear there's some news. Your book is out. Is that correct?
My book is out. It is.
Defeating the Darkness.
Defeating the Darkness.
It's in print. And where is it available?
You can buy it on Amazon. Amazon.com. It's the easiest place to send you. And yeah, it's available on digital copy or also for $14.99 on Amazon. So feel free to buy it and share it with somebody that you know that could use some hope and a message of empowerment after having been sexually abused. It's also really informative for teachers as well, because the book is about, it's survivor stories of people who've overcome sexual abuse while in the schools and institutions, people I've personally prosecuted, and just how I've, seen the victims of sexual assault really transform into survivors by becoming empowered by telling their story and using what happened to them for something good in other people's lives and to contribute to try and stop this from happening to other people. And it's not just a message of hope, it's really a call to action on a global level so that we can put a dent in the darkness that surrounds us, which is child sexual abuse. So I hope you buy the book, Tom Brown. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you.
We're not.
We're not.
But we
thanks for the
do.
plug.
There's a theme between this and your podcast and your guests on your podcast. Not necessarily myself. I'm just happen to live close by and can fill a spot, I think. No.
That's not true. That's not true. When we spoke on the last episode, I kind of got the backstory from you about how you became an FBI agent, and honestly, I've kind of forgot what we talked about, but I know we talked about you and how you came to be. And so I think when we left off, we were talking about your time on the SWAT team. And so I'd like for you to tell the listeners a little bit about that, about what a badass you are. Because, I've always found it to be super sexy that you were on SWAT. What is SWAT? What does SWAT even stand for?
Well, SWAT stands for Special Weapons and Tactics. It started, probably Los Angeles Police Department started it when police departments needed, they realized during the riots in the late 60s, they realized that they needed to have, instead of just patrol officers coming in and never having trained together, to handle more high-risk situations. And so they took a lot of their Vietnam veterans, military, people with military experience, and kind of made a team that could go into high-risk search warrants, high-risk arrest situations, and more volatile situations that train together and prepare together. Last year, the FBI, or 2 years ago now, in 2023, the FBI celebrated its 50th year of SWAT, and it's been here in Los Angeles that entire time. So it was started by an individual named Jerry Crow here in Los Angeles. He joined up. He was working in Los Angeles, joined up with some of the folks at LAPD who had done it. He took the program back to Quantico back in the early 70s, and they said that's great. And then they developed the FBI SWAT program. And it's Special Weapons and Tactics. It's just a group of individuals for the FBI. Most of the SWAT teams don't have full-time what they call operators. They're people like myself and other agents who are working in their individual cases, and then they train 2 to 4 days a month, come together at a training site, do some extra firearms training, room entries. They call it CQB, close quarter battle, and just prepare themselves for those operations. And then when the office has a need, high risk situation, they'll request the SWAT team. The SWAT team will respond to kidnappings, armed and dangerous folks, barricade situations, hostage situations, anything along those lines. So a lot of drug search warrants, things where drugs and guns and money were involved, kidnapping cases. Those were the primary ones. Most of the time, they were pre-planned. If they got a location for an individual, the case agents would work up the individual, all the information on the case. We'd do our site surveys, and we'd go out and then we'd effect the arrests and search warrants and clear the house. It was a lot of fun, and you still got to work your cases while we were doing it. You got to be involved in a lot of the high risk or high profile cases that the office got involved in. So you have to be a part of those type of cases.
That does sound like fun. How long did you do that for?
I was on the team for 10 years, including 5 years as one of the assault team leaders. And then after I got off, we had a group of individuals who were no longer training full time with the team, but were available to help the team when they needed extra bodies, and we would work the perimeter. We called them the gold team, but really we were the old team. So we knew what the guys that were doing the entry, we knew what those individuals were doing. So we were in the close perimeter with them and can help them out if they needed to be. And I did that for quite a few years after I had gotten off the team on a full-time basis.
Yeah, I remember we were married when you were on the old team. I didn't get you.
The gold team.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the gold team. Okay, when you were on this gold team, you got to wear that like sexy little SWAT jumpsuit, right? That little outfit.
So that little outfit, and again, it's not an outfit. I never wore an outfit a day in my life. The SWAT uniform had changed over the years, and for that period of time, we were wearing the flight suit similar to military pilots. And at the time, we were wearing a black flight suit. It has changed over the years, but
what color is it now?
They're wearing the green, the light green, faded, similar to
I like the
military.
black.
And they're not wearing the flight suits. They're wearing just individual pants and shirts and stuff now.
Oh, really?
No more flight suits.
Bummer.
Sorry.
How do you pee if you're on like a special op and you got to go to the bathroom? You got one of those jumpsuits on.
Those zippers go both directions.
Oh, you just unzip it and you have to pull the whole thing down though?
Yeah, I mean, if you're really in a bind and, you just do what you got to do. No, I'm just kidding.
We can cut that out, Pete. No, I'm just kidding. That's funny. I mean, these are the questions people want to know.
So the idea is before the operation starts,
you
take care of that business. You know, like when you were a kid, like, we're going on a road trip, go to the bathroom before we go. You don't really have to tell it to the SWAT operators, but they pretty much know that.
Is that what they called you, SWAT operators?
Yes.
And this SWAT team that you were on it for 10 years. Then you were on the old team. And I remember quite a few years you were doing that. But you didn't get paid any extra money, right?
No, it's a collateral duty. So you got your special agent salary, and that was it. So you just, I got involved in training also, firearms training. I was a defensive tactics instructor, and I was on the SWAT team, a tactical instructor. They're all just collateral duties. So you've got your cases, you work your extra stuff, and you just get the thrill of doing it. You don't get any extra pay. I know that upset you, no bonus, even though we spent, get up early in the morning and spent long days out there. There was no overtime or anything.
I know you'd be gone for a long time. And then you couldn't tell me where you were going. And then, I was a little sus at first. I was like, what? This sounds like bullshit. But you did, generally have some corroboration as to where your whereabouts.
I usually had good corroboration.
I'm just kidding. Okay, so tell the listeners about some fun SWAT ops you were on. Like, what kind of stuff were you working?
So quite a few kidnappings over the years, quite a few, again, just high-risk search warrants, drug cases, gang cases. We covered all the counties. Majority of the cases were in the LA area, in, the poorer parts of town where you might have, a lot of gang activity and stuff. So when the agents that were working those type of cases, and they decide, you read about them a lot of times in the paper, you see them on the news where, task force goes out and executes, 100 plus search warrants, something like that, arrest warrants, and kind of just to make a big show at one time. So they'd put those cases together, and we'd go out and we'd just go door to door and hit those cases. But the ones I really enjoyed the most were the kidnapping cases, extortion cases. There were some fun, interesting stories, I guess. Hopefully they're interesting. I find them interesting. My first case, I just gotten on the team in June of 1992, and in September was the first really big case that that I was involved in, and it was a kidnapping that had been going on. A teenager who was a high school senior. His parents were wealthy. They lived in the Santa Barbara area. And he was kidnapped, and there were calls coming in trying to, get the ransom money from the family. And our tech folks, and this was 1992, our tech folks were trying to track those phone calls, trap them in there. And nowadays, nobody has phones attached to their house. Very few people have phones that come to the houses. But if you remember back in those days, there were the phone boxes that were at the end of the block, or depending upon how big the neighborhood was, and you'd always see the phone vehicle, the AT&T or Pacific Bell, whatever it was at the time, going in there and connecting somebody's phone and disconnecting it when people were moving in and out and giving them their phone numbers. Well, those boxes, the wires would all come in from the neighborhoods, and what our tech folks, they were trying to trap those phone calls that were coming in demanding the ransom money for this 17-year-old. They found that, it's coming from this house, and we do a workup on it, and it's like, it doesn't really, nothing else was matching up that it was a kidnapper's house. And then it was come from another house and another house. And so over the course of 2 weeks, it was coming from multiple, and our tech folks figured out that there were actually, the kidnappers were wiring into those call boxes and basically making it seem like the calls were coming from someone's house, but they were actually coming from the junction boxes. So one of the things that we ended up doing was we spent a couple nights laying out it was Santa Barbara, a pretty rural area, large homes, pretty big properties. And we laid in the woods with visuals on these phone boxes, trying to find these kidnappers coming in, plugging in to make a demand call.
Wow. So you were surveilling the phone boxes.
So we were surveilling the phone boxes.
Were you wearing that little black jumpsuit?
We were like 2-man teams spread throughout the area. We were in our black flight suits, in our outfits.
I'm just trying to get a visual during the story.
We were in our outfits. And during the course of the one night, some other information was being developed, and all of a sudden we got called back in. Nobody came to the call box that I was at, and were brought together, and eventually we had identified, they had identified a house that they thought the victim might be at, or the subjects might be at. It was a beautiful home, and we ended up finding the victim up in that home at about 3 or 4 in the morning. We stopped a car that was coming down the road. It happened to be a family member of what ended up being one of the kidnappers. And the kidnappers were just slightly older than, they were like early 20s, and they were still living with their wealthy parents. And they kidnapped this kid who they knew was wealthy. I don't think they had any personal relationship. They just knew him from the area, and that his parents were wealthy, and so they were trying to make some money on it. They weren't very sophisticated. They were, obviously coming up with the call box stuff, but as far as how to get the money and what to do with it and what to do with the victim, they weren't that type of criminals. And we ended up recovering that victim. He had actually spent 2 weeks with them. They had him in a little outbuilding on their property. They had him chained up and confined. But when we finally got to him, he was unchained, and he was in the house, but he almost had like Stockholm syndrome, kind of like Patty Hearst type thing. He wasn't trying to escape. You don't know if he was afraid or whatever. So he did have some psychological. So I remember reading, as the case went on, I think he did end up going to college, and hopefully he's doing well to this day. But he had been kidnapped and held victim for about 2 weeks, and it was kind of a neat first case to be involved in. Like I said, surveilling call boxes.
Did the parents know that he was there in the house?
We always thought that they had to know something was going on, but
like who's the guy in chains in the little back outhouse?
They were never charged, and they were, not really, I don't know how much time they had spent at the house, and if they, just their 20-something kids and his friends were coming and going, and they weren't really paying attention to what was going on, and so I think they just were kind of oblivious to it.
Interesting. And when you captured him, when you rescued him, how did that go down? Like, tell us how that went.
Well, if any of my old partners are listening, they're gonna get they're gonna be entertained by this. But so we had the perimeter set. Again, we knew that the house, the individuals in the house, at least some of them weren't criminals, weren't involved in this, and we weren't sure. So we had stopped this vehicle down the road and got one of the parents, ended up being one of the parents of the thing. And so actually our team leader and our SWAT team coordinator, the supervisor, Doug Kane and Mark Llewellyn, I'll throw their names out there so some of my old partners can get a joke at. But we had the perimeter set, we're ready to do the breach and entry, and they just went up there and they ended up going in the front door, and then a couple other folks went in there and they found the victim inside. I stayed out on the perimeter, so I was one of the new guys.
So they just walked in the front door?
Just walked in. It didn't end up being a really, really crazy SWAT entry. It was more the build up to it, and their initial impression that this kid might have been involved, right? Because he wasn't confined at the time that they recovered him, and he had all the ability to flee. It appeared that he had all the ability to flee. So the initial thought from that was that maybe he had been involved in it and was trying to basically extort his parents and get money, and help his buddies, and steal from his own parents. But that turned out not to be the case. He was a legitimate victim.
Oh, wow. Crazy. Okay, so have you ever been shot at?
I have not been shot at directly.
What does that mean? Second time I've heard that today.
Well, we had a call out. So one of our SWAT team members, who his primary job was working fugitives with Los Angeles Police Department, and he and his LAPD partner were out looking for a fugitive who was wanted for an attempted murder, drive-by shooting at a girlfriend's house in Las Vegas, in Nevada and Vegas area. They had him tracked to a hotel in downtown Los Angeles, one of the old school, 1920s, taller building hotel. And they got there, they got a pass key, decided that they were going to try and surreptitiously go in there. Well, he apparently heard something at the door, and when they reached the door, the subject inside there fired some shots at them through the door. Now we've got a barricade, called out the team. They started clearing out the floor. Those two guys, Scott, our SWAT team member, and his LAPD partner, we all started responding. I responded, and we eventually came up with a plan that first we tried putting gas in there. We had a little canister underneath the door.
So that stuff you see on TV where they throw the canister of gas?
Well, sometimes you could throw a canister, but obviously we couldn't get. So then he had locked, once he shot and they came back, then he put the deadbolts on the door and all the stuff that you can't, your key card or key won't work on the door entry. So he basically barricaded up the door, made it, difficult to breach. We eventually did breach it, but so then we tried to put gas underneath the door using a tube from the canister and putting it under there. He was actually pretty intelligent. He got wet towels, all the towels. He wet them down and put them on the inside there to kind of absorb all the CS gas, so it didn't.
That is smart.
Didn't affect it. So he did that.
Now, when you guys did that, were you guys wearing gas masks yourselves?
So at the time, we had them with us, but we didn't have them on because we hadn't yet gone into the room and there was no gas coming on our side.
And what's the gas do?
The gas, it's makes you cough. It kind of irritates
like pepper spray?
So we do have, it's similar to pepper. Pepper spray is more direct, spray from a little canister. CS gas will, expand in the room and make you cough, make your eyes water, make you can't open your eyes, that type of stuff. Similar experience, but it'll be like more of a gas thing as opposed to a stream coming at your eye like a pepper spray.
Okay.
And so he was inside the room. The first agent that was on scene with his LAPD partner was negotiating with him, talking to him, trying to get him to give up. Developed a pretty good rapport with him, and that agent, Scott Hanley, he eventually became a negotiator too. He had from that case that kind of pursued him, made him pursue the negotiating aspect of it. So during this, after some shots fired occasionally through the door and into the hallway, and we've got people, and we're back a little bit, cleared out the hallway. We eventually decided that we were going to make entry with shields and a shield team. So a 2-man shield team, and a pretty long size shield with a ballistic port that you can viewport you can see through. I was on one of the shield teams, and we had three 2-man teams, and I had a partner who had a long gun. He was basically behind me, and he had one of at the time, our entry weapons were MP5s. And so he had that. I just had a handgun because I had the shield and my handgun on that. We eventually breached. A couple of my partners, they shotgun breached the hinges of the door, and they were able to get the door open. As we breached, there were more shots fired, and what eventually happened was the defendant in there had committed suicide while he was in the bathroom. So we saw him as we came in our view, and then he tucked around the corner in the hotel room and committed suicide in there. So.
Oh, wow.
So no shots directly fired at me, fortunately, on that, but he was shots were fired in our area, and I think the breachers probably were most exposed coming in there because they had to get out there with the shotgun breaching rounds trying to get those hinges cleared so we can make entry.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so other than that, no shots? You ever shot anybody?
I have not ever shot anybody.
My brother Ted's convinced that you've killed multiple people. I'm like, so, I think he dressed up like a UPS driver once. That was the most exciting thing.
I'll pop the balloon a little bit on the myth. So SWAT, they are the highest risk, involved in most of the highest risk situations, armed and dangerous folks. But for the most part, you have a lot less shootings. Majority of the times you were able to resolve those situations peacefully. And that's the whole idea of it. Where you have a patrol officer who gets a 911 call to a house and he has to respond to a domestic. He has no idea what's going on. He pulls somebody over with a broken taillight. He doesn't know what's going on with that individual. When we decide we're going to go ahead and make entry, we bring 20, 30, sometimes 40 of our closest friends, who are well-trained, trained together. So most people...
In those little jumpsuits.
In our outfits.
In your outfits.
In our outfits. So we bring all those folks out there together, and most people decide that they don't want to fight us. And that's, for me, during my career, that they didn't want to fight. And that one situation, he didn't want to fight, but he didn't want to give up either. And so he took his own life, unfortunately. But most people... even if you hear them on, a lot of the cases had wiretaps and stuff, and they'd say, "Oh, they're never going to take me alive." It's just like you see on the movies. Never going to take me alive. And the first thing you breach that door, you throw a flashbang in there, and you come in there and go up, put your hands up, "Don't shoot, I'm coming out," and they give up, and that was majority of my experience out there. They gave up in a heartbeat, and that's why we train. That's why you put those teams together to handle those situations, so that if you go in there haphazard, you don't go in there with, we would call it speed, violence, and surprise. Speed, surprise, and violence of action. You come in there and resolve that situation before anybody really knows what's going on. We would try to hit, if it was a pre-planned arrest, hit them at 6 o'clock in the morning, unless we had a night service warrant, get them when they're still kind of in that REM sleep. And
you're all groggy.
And groggy. And not
hungover. You're like, oh damn, there's like 20 guys in these little outfits with guns drawn at me.
Yeah, and every now and then, you'll find when we, guns close proximity to them, but they realize that they didn't really have a chance. Maybe I get one shot off, but they know that they're gonna take the brunt of it. So, majority of them would give up. Now they don't all. Some of them commit suicide by cop. Those type of things.
Okay, so have you ever been undercover?
Not in any long-term capacity.
Not like Donnie Brasco on the...
No. That's a tough life. And I knew, agents, sometimes people will go like fully undercover to work cases. It could be corruption cases, drug cases. And you got to really kind of get in that lifestyle. And it's tough. You don't get to go home to your family and live that normal life. I did a couple of, you come in there and you don't say who you are, that type of thing. One of the cases that I told you about early on, it was a white collar case. It was a check fraud case back in the 90s, and they were delivering some check paper. UPS was delivering some check paper to a counterfeiter, and
so they were making counterfeit checks.
Counterfeit checks, yeah. So they and what they were doing is they were targeting large companies that had millions of dollars of transactions every day, and you're not going to find that. So it could
not
be,
like at the grocery store where they hold it up.
No, not a $400 or $500 check. So they had to get good check paper, and let's just take it wasn't, these companies didn't exist, but say like an Amazon or something like that. They would get how Amazon pays all their vendors, and they would get a check and they'd have it at Amazon. They'd have it payable to them for $15,000, and then, the Amazon's not going to pick up, or the particular company. Again, it wasn't Amazon. I don't even remember what companies they were targeting, but they were targeting for large scale things, and they ended up being hundreds of thousands, probably into the millions of dollars worth of fraud that occurred. And these companies realized, hey, these audits aren't matching up. They're coming up with them, probably 3, 4, 6 months later in quarterly audits and stuff. So they end up getting information that I think the case got broke by actually the manufacturer of the checks, the company that was doing it. It's like, that doesn't seem like a right address to be sending these checks through. And so they contacted their local FBI office and said, hey, we're sending this check paper to like a hotel room or something like that. And I ended up borrowing as they were making the delivery, I ended up throwing a UPS
outfit
on. I guess I did wear an outfit. Throw the UPS outfit on, and I took the delivery, and I made the delivery in there while the driver, stayed, away. I saw what was in the room and saw the other stuff of the crime, and we used that to get a search warrant. And
have fun.
It was fun.
So you went undercover as a UPS driver. It was
just a little simple thing. Yeah.
From flashbangs to UPS driver.
Yeah. So I'll tell you about another case. And the reason I want to mention this one is, and this has nothing to do with SWAT or anything, was I just had to testify in federal court in December.
I remember that.
Just a couple months ago.
The gold team went in.
It was not, so I got a call from an agent who said, hey, any chance you might remember, and he had tracked me down through some other folks, and hey, do you remember a case back in 1994? And it was an armored car robbery case, and I remembered all the details about it because it was a pretty fun case. So we had and this is what I had to testify about, and I'll kind of lay the foundation of why I was testifying 30 years later. That individual got a sentence of over 40 years, and during COVID, he had served about, coming up on 30 years, 27, 28 years, whatever. They were thinning out the federal prison population. He had been a pretty model citizen while he was in custody for the last 27, 28 years. And so they released him to help thin the prison population and just put him on, supervised release. Well, what does a armored car robber guy do?
He robbed another armored car.
He went and did another robbery. And if you get caught the first time, you're probably not that good at it. So he got caught again. and he was.
Can you imagine? You got a 40-something-year sentence, so you're basically going to spend the rest of your life in prison. Then they let you out early, and you go back to crime. Like, what a dumbass.
Yeah. So he ended up going to trial this past December on the new robbery. And due to some court cases that you're probably more familiar with,
They're trying to prove up
they
his
had to
priors.
prove up the priors, and they couldn't just bring in the records. Now they have to have somebody be able to testify to it. So I had to come in there and testify about his prior 2 armored car robberies.
Well, thank God you don't drink alcohol, because you wouldn't have remembered 30 years ago.
That's true. That's true.
Right? That's one good thing.
But the fun part about and I didn't get to tell the story. They were very limited on what they allowed me to testify to in front of the jury. It was just the yes and no. Was that true, my hostile witness, or what? Where I can't expand my thoughts. I can only say yes or no.
Oh, that's just federal court.
Yeah. I thought you were an attorney, prosecutor.
I am an attorney.
Okay.
But
Well,
generally speaking,
right.
that's how
So
you're supposed to answer.
They didn't allow me to tell the story because the story would be too prejudicial. So I was very limited. Basically, I just said, yeah, he did. You know, I was aware of the robbery. I investigated it, and he did it, and we found him. It was very limited. But the individual, whose name is Markham David Bond, he robbed a credit union in Buena Park in 1994 in March. And I remember the dates now just because I testified to it a couple months ago. He did a courier robbery in March. He dressed an armored car robbery. He dressed as a mailman, and he had surveilled, and he knew when the armored car was going to make a delivery to this credit union. And he had a bag, and he had his gun hidden in the bag. And when the armored car driver was bringing in the cash to the bank, he just pulled his gun out of this mail bag that he had, put it at the back of the head of the armored car driver, took the money, and fled. Well, as he did that, he dropped some loose mail that he had in this bag that as part of his costume, and we found his fingerprints on it.
Nice.
So when we started trying to look, I was like, okay, we found his fingerprints. He had a prior record for, I think, some drugs or something like that. We started looking for him, ended up spending about 4 months looking for him, and we had identified a girlfriend and family members in different places that he might be, but we just couldn't ever track him down. And we worked a lot with the Buena Park Police Department and my partners, including one of them, Chris Blair, who's since passed away. He ended up, we had given our number right where you went to school, Loyola Marymount. So a couple of young guys were leasing office agents for an apartment right near Loyola Marymount University off the 405. We knew that his girlfriend, this guy Markham Bond's girlfriend, was living there, and said, hey, if you see him, give us a call. We gave our number, and it's back. We only had pagers. We didn't have cell phones. Chris and I happened to be in Los Angeles in July morning. We were riding together. Our pager goes off. We call, and I says, hey, he's here now. And he had told us, the young man who was working the leasing office told us, yeah, when he comes here, he uses his payphone at the gas station next to the apartments, and he parks his car in the back parking lot. Okay, well, that's good information. So we start driving down the 405 from Westwood, get off at the exit there by Loyola Marymount, and as we do, there's our subjects on the payphone next to the gas station. So Chris and I drive up, and we've got the cop-looking car. I don't know if it was a Chevy Impala or a Crown Vic, but it wasn't an undercover car. So even though we were dressed in just coats and ties, we drive up, get out. He's on the phone, and he says, "Nope, the feds are here." And he just hangs up the phone. He's very compliant, and he was just like he was a model prisoner. He didn't run. He didn't fight us. We get him cuffed up. He's got the keys to his car in his pocket. We knew what type of vehicle he was driving, and that's parked in the back parking lot. We go back there, and by this time we get call other people up here to help us and transport and stuff like that. We pop the keys, pop the trunk, bag full of money, and a gun and some other stuff in there. And we're like, where'd this come from? Because the robbery was about 4 months. Robbery was about 4 months before. He had done another armored car robbery at Hollywood Park Casino that morning. And had just robbed it, came over, probably was going to do something with his girlfriend and go somewhere. It was, I think it was close to $400,000 he got on that one.
Oh,
And we
wow.
found it all in the trunk of the car. And that was the end of that case. And
All right. That was an easy one, huh?
that was it. We didn't even know about it. And that was one of the things I had to testify at the trial. I'm like, I wasn't investigating that second robbery. I didn't even know about it. Because somebody in Los Angeles, the agents that were working robberies there, had gotten a call and knew about that robbery, but we hadn't put any of that together. We were just working the Buena Park robbery. And
Wow. Okay, tell us about another kidnapping.
another kidnapping.
I kind of remember one where every time we go
Oh.
to drive out to, I feel like it's Palm Springs. You're like,
Ontario,
we had a
Ontario area, yeah.
we had a kidnapping there. Tell us about that one.
Right where the 60 and the 10 merge.
I was right. It was when we go to Palm Springs, huh?
When we go to Palm Springs, where the 60 and the 10 merge, in between, and now it's built up a little bit differently now, but I think this was probably late 90s. There was a big storage lot. People were, business that rented out space for RV storage, those type of things. A kid got kidnapped. Well, the owner of that was a mom. Her husband had recently passed away, and she took over the business. And she had a son who was about early 20s. And the son was talking on the phone to his girlfriend as he gets kidnapped. He's talking to her and like come in. She hears the commotion. She hears the stuff going on, and the kid gets kidnapped.
Now, is this like you see in the movies where they put a ski mask over him or they put a bag over his head and they?
So we didn't know exactly what, but we worked the case for the agents in Riverside. Were working the kidnapping case for, again, probably a week or two, and they were working it, on shifts 24/7 and getting a little burned out. So they started asking for some help from the Orange County office, Santa Ana office, where I was working. And so a number of us went out there and we started just covering some leads, following up, checking out addresses, doing all this stuff. Because over the course of the investigation, they had developed some leads, but they still hadn't tracked down this kid.
How long was he missing? I mean,
he was missing. It was a couple of weeks, and there was actually a drop that was attempted, a ransom drop.
That's what I was going to say. Did they call the mom and say, bring us some money?
They were calling. We were tracking. The tech folks were working. A lot of people working. Quite a number of hours. There was an attempted drop, and they came and they were on a motorcycle, if I recall correctly, and there was a shots fired at the scene of the drop, but the subject still got away. I think maybe there might have been somebody arrested at that drop, but it wasn't the primary. And so the case was still going on, and we're working the case, covering some leads out in that Banning, Beaumont area where the 60 and the 10 merge. And one of my partners, Tim White, Tim and Tony Caruso, we were working two-man teams. I was actually working with Chris Blair that day also.
Tim White, your fake partner? Yeah.
Tim White, Tom Brown, those were the names that they gave us at the academy, and we kept them ever since.
I want to know what your real last name is.
That's it. Brown.
For the listeners.
Brown and Tim White. So
if I find out, if I find out for 1 second that your name is not really Tom Brown, I'm going to be so mad because I always wanted a name.
You won't know till I'm dead.
I know, right? I always wanted, well, you won't get the life insurance if your name's not really Tom Brown.
I have ways.
I always wanted to name our first child, whether it was a boy or a girl, Charlie. But I couldn't because
After
you have
Grandpa
that
Charlie.
boring ass last name of Brown.
Charlie
which
Brown's
everybody
a great name.
I was not.
I was willing to go with it.
I was not. So you and your fake partner Tim White.
So Tim White and Tony Caruso were at one location. Chris Blair and I were at another location, and there was another two-man team from Orange County out there also. I think Scott Gicking and I'm not sure who the sixth was. But we were out there. Tim and Tony ended up going and tracking down an address that ended up being a warehouse building in Ontario. And as they drive by this address, now it's starting to get later in the evening, dusky, and they see the warehouse building as they're driving by on the main street. The warehouse looks overgrown and unused, like not currently active. But they see on the entry road coming off the main street, the driveway, somebody out there just sweeping up the gravel on the gravel driveway in. And they're like, well, that doesn't seem right because the whole building, weeds and grass, everything's overgrown, doesn't look active. So being trained investigators, that they were.
We call that
a clue. That's a clue. So Tim and Tony decide to go up and talk to the guy that's got the broom in his hand. And he starts, what are you doing? And his answers are not coherent. They're not anywhere what you'd expect him to say. So they're like, something's not right here. So they put the cuffs on him and they get on the radio and say, hey, we're not sure what we got here, but something's not right. Can you get some more people over here? Now, people are kind of all spread out, covering different leads. Chris and I happen to be closest, so we're the next two that come up. And then the local police department sends one of their patrol officers over, and he happens to have a cadet, an explorer in the vehicle with him. So we give the in custody or the detained individual that was sweeping, give him to a patrol officer from Ontario. I think it was Ontario PD or Riverside Sheriff's. And the four of us go back to the back of the warehouse building where it's got the big roll-up door so trucks can go in and offload cargo and stuff. And the roll-up door is partially open. And there's a music box playing in there. And now it's kind of dark. There are some lights, but it not lighting up the whole warehouse building. And we just call in there and we're got a little bit of cover around the corner. Like, anybody in there? And we get no response initially. And then we get I'm in here. Come on out. I can't. Why not? I'm chained. Was there anybody in there with you? Yes. And there's a lot of debris and stuff in our view, like we're looking under there. There's the cargo's part of a semi-trailers back there. There's boxes and just all kinds of debris in there. So we can't see who we're talking to. And there's a lot of nooks and crannies in this warehouse behind box where people could be hiding. So we don't know what we've got. And the individual that we're talking to said, yeah, I can't come out and there's somebody here with me. And we're not going to answer. Oh. So we go in there and we start trying to clear this building. Eventually we get past the semi truck and get into the area where we can see where our victim was. And he was chained to his vehicle. They had kidnapped him and taken him in his own vehicle. So they got him from his apartment, grabbed his vehicle, took him with whatever vehicle, and then they put it in the back of this warehouse building, which is why we had never seen the vehicle because it had been stored away. He had been there for about 2 weeks. They had duct tape over his eyes. He didn't have a shirt on because when he was talking to his girlfriend, he just had his trousers on and I don't know, getting ready to take a shower, but he didn't have nothing on his feet, I don't think. And they put duct tape over his eyes, and he was in a decent condition, I guess, eventually, but he was, he had been in a bad spot for about 2 weeks and, kind of chained there, having to go to a bathroom in a bucket, not being able to see anything for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
We cleared the rest of the building. And again, we weren't sure if there was anybody else there because he didn't know how many people were with him. And he had no idea. He's like, yeah, there's somebody with me. He had no idea that we already had that person in custody on the outside.
Oh.
Excuse me.
That's who he was talking about.
So that's who he was talking about. The phone starts ringing. There's a phone inside there that's active. That starts ringing, and it turns out to be the other cat. Our tech folks are tracking different phone lines and stuff like that. So now all of a sudden, we get information that there's vehicles coming towards our location, and by this time now we start calling in other people, and other people start showing up there. But we recovered that kid. That was a neat case. The way it ended up playing out. Definitely another legitimate victim. And again, we got the duct tape off. I'm not sure who took off the duct tape, but his eyes were, all puffy and the glue and stuff was around. He had to get some medical treatment. But other than that, he was in pretty good shape.
Were they feeding him?
Yeah, they fed him.
But they made him go to the bathroom in a bucket?
Yeah, they just had him. They had like a long chain, and they had it around the axle of his vehicle. And then they had him I don't know if they had what they had. They had some type of cuffs or zip ties on him, and they had it hooked to the chain. So he couldn't really get up and move around. He could get, at a couple feet of, almost like a dog on a leash.
That's awful.
Yeah.
And they were just trying to get money from his mom.
Yeah, they were just doing it for money, and they knew she had taken over the business. They figured that there was whatever insurance money or whatever they had, and they wanted to get that money from
And
her.
did you ever get the other guys?
Yeah, well, eventually they tracked down all the primaries on that, but not immediately that night. It was continuing to find out, talking to the people that we got in custody and developing it from there.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad that you all worked that out and found that young man. That's terrible.
Did I tell you? I don't know if we talked about it on the first episode about the police officer from Fountain Valley.
No, tell me about that one.
Okay, I'll try and hit that pretty quickly. But another bank robbery case, again, last millennial, last century in the 90s. We had a bank robber who ended up being a former police officer from the Fountain Valley Police Department. His name was Kevin Arnold, and it was really a unique set of circumstances that kind of brought him to robbing banks and then us to finding him. Kevin Arnold was a president of their POA, their Police Officers Association. He was one of the four Medal of Valor winners in their police department that they had at the time. So he had been involved in some high-risk situations and performed very bravely, and was awarded the Medal of Valor. He was president of their association. He was a canine officer.
Married?
He was married, had a couple of kids, and he lived close by here in Mission Viejo.
And he was robbing banks.
And he was robbing banks.
What the hell was he robbing banks for? Gambling?
We had so back when I was working robberies, the way you would put those cases together is we ended up identifying people, they call them serial robbers. They would rob multiple banks, and you get little clues from each different robbery. And we had about 5 or 6 robberies that we knew was the same person from surveillance cameras. They were not great quality, but we didn't have any fingerprints. We didn't have any DNA or anything at the time, nothing to really go on and identify them. We just knew that this person was the same person who robbed these 6 or 7 banks.
Did you give him a name? The FBI always gives bank robbers a name.
We gave him a name. We
What
called
was
him
his-
the Buckeye Bandit.
The Buckeye Bandit.
The Buckeye Bandit. During one of the robberies and one of the better surveillance pictures, he was wearing a baseball cap, and it was Ohio State Buckeyes. And so there was no other really distinctive qualities about him that we identified. So he was the Buckeye Bandit. They did these robberies pretty close in time, and then nothing for about another 6 months, maybe even a little bit longer. And then another series of robberies started coming, and we're like, oh, this is the same guy from last year.
That's the Buckeye Bandit.
That's the Buckeye Bandit. So my first thought, when as we're working these cases, he was in custody during this period of time. He got picked up for drugs or something and was serving some time on something, obviously not the robberies. And then he got back out and started robbing again. That was a typical thing. So we had always, at the time, we would put together flyers and we would send them out to different police departments and different agencies, parole officers, probation. Hey, do you recognize this guy? Is this guy one of yours? And we sent, those flyers to Orange County Jail at the time. And we're expecting them to come back with, hey, it's, we just had this guy and this is who it is. Well, we did get that from the Orange County Jail, but it was because somebody was in custody. It was like, I know who that guy is. I worked with him. He's a cop. And it was a sheriff's deputy who worked canines and recognized the flyer and says, that's Kevin Arnold. He's a cop at Fountain Valley Police Department.
Oh my gosh. Were you like, what the heck?
And
The Buckeye Bandit's a police officer?
yes. So
Why was he robbing banks? I'm pretty sure the cops get paid pretty decent at least.
Apparently he didn't have enough money. So he decided at one point while he was the president of their POA, he was a little short of cash apparently, and he embezzled $35,000 from their association. Well, at some point somebody's like, hey, some money's missing. And they started investigating him. He eventually got caught on that. But before he got caught, he started trying to replenish the money when he realized that they were kind of onto him. So that's when he started robbing banks to try and put the money back into the POA. So he did those robberies, and I'm sorry.
He did those robberies.
He did the robberies to try and put the money back in the POA, but it was too late. They figured out the embezzlement. So he ended up getting charged, and he pled real quick, and he was not in custody, but he was on he was in custody for a short bit, maybe 30, 60 days, and he was on home confinement with an ankle monitor and stuff like that. Well, he decided he was still going to continue robbing out there, so he started the new series of robberies. We put it all together, and he eventually, we were down there to make an arrest on him, and my partner, Tim White, Tony Caruso, this was the crew that we were working
Tim,
robberies.
Tom, and Tony?
Yeah, Tim, Tom, and Tony. Those were bank robbery guys back in Orange County in the day, and we were all on the SWAT team, so we did a lot of work together. He eventually got involved in a physical confrontation, was acting as though he had a gun, and basically saying, tell my wife I love her, and he basically committed suicide by cop. He started dragging Tim as he started trying to drive, jumped into his car and started trying to drive away with Tim hanging into his vehicle, and Tim ended up shooting him. And
Oh, gosh.
yeah, so it was a tragic end for, it was definitely a fall from grace for him.
I'll say from Medal of Valor to bank robber to the Buckeye Bandit to getting shot in a
Dying as a
fisticuffs.
fugitive, yeah.
Oh, my
Being
gosh.
killed, yeah.
God, that's a terrible bedtime story.
That is, yeah.
But I'm glad you busted him and he stopped because, every time people rob those banks, they're terrorizing the tellers. I've seen some really psychologically damaged bank tellers.
I talked to quite a few that they eventually either quit right away or quit a short period of time afterwards. They get traumatized, and I hopefully now it might be better. But back in the day, they weren't offered any services by the banks and credit unions and stuff. They were kind of left to deal with it on their own, and a lot of them, it was really tough. They weren't able to do that.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming back here and telling us all these interesting stories. I mean, I know you kind of had to because we're married, and I told you to get out here and tell us some stories. But I love hearing your stories, Tom Brown, FBI. And I appreciate the man, the myth, the legend. And not only do I like hearing your stories, but I do really want to thank you on behalf of the citizens of, Orange County and all the counties that you worked in for so many years, tirelessly serving, not only your military service, serving the country as a Marine, but as an FBI agent for many, many years and training SWAT and being willing to risk your life and your safety to protect other people. It's very honorable and noble, and I don't tell you enough, but I do appreciate everything you do. And I love the fact that you cook dinner, do the laundry, and walk the dog as well. You're a good man, Tom Brown. You are the man, the myth, the legend, and I'm expecting you to put that little outfit on later after I finish working my 5th job tonight when I get home. That's why you keep me. That's why you keep me working so much. So I'm too tired to bitch at you, huh?
I did my time. I don't want to have to work too hard anymore now. So.
Well, nor should you have to. You've done your service, and
I had a great career. Thank you for your kind words. But I had a great time, a great career, great experiences, and I live to tell about it. So.
And I bet a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, and God bless you. And I'll see you soon.
But you have another job to go to?
I have another job I have to go to. So for now, it's a wrap. But thank you, Tom Brown. The man, the myth, the legend. There it is. There you have it. My husband, Tom Brown, FBI. Until we meet again, if you can't find the light, be the light. For the record, that's Tom Brown's tagline. He came up with that whole thing for me. So I got to give credit where credit's due. Thank you. Thank you,
sweetheart. It works. It fits.
Wait, I love it. It's a good one. So if you can't find the light, be the light like Tom Brown, FBI. See you next time. So long.
Be the light, shine so bright.